What up, everyone? Before we get started, I want to let you know that we discover that Cam Newton will not play around 30 minutes into the show. We re-up on all the Carolina Panthers news at that time, so just bear with us on that. Siege and DC are on the show. You're going to love that. And if you want to get into a draw for $20 DK, hit the like button right now. Leave your DraftKings handle in the comment section. Let me know which quarterback you would play on DraftKings in the Millionaire Maker in Week 16. Let's go.
Entering the Mayo experience.
Mayo experience. Mayo experience. Mayo experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience, the penultimate week of full slate action. Millionaire Maker Slate, Week 16, DraftKings picks and preview. I will return next week for the Week 17 DraftKings picks. Expect that out next Friday because I'm not going to work on Christmas. Hate to tell you. There will be Christmas content. It just won't be fresh. It's already recorded and in the can for you to enjoy. Who wouldn't love a Christmas Cuts Corner? Because that's what you're getting. Some golf shows as well. But Week 17 DraftKings picks and Week 17 spread picks will be live towards Thursday and Friday next week. Joining me to break down the Week 17 slate in the blue corner from Fantasy Guru Elite, it is the one, the only. Who knows what his Twitter avatar is today? DraftCheat, what's up?
What's going on, man? Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for coming on. In the red corner, his arch nemesis from Arbor Pro, it is the Siege.
What's going on, Pat? At least we know what week it is. This is Week 16.
Did I say Week 17?
You did.
Yeah, well, I said Week 17 shows will be coming next week in Week 17. Listen, you're the ones here to espouse the advice, but I'm just here just as sort of a talking head, as a conduit to get you two together. First question: when's the fight?
Late March. We're still sorting out the actual date, but it's coming.
Do you have a venue picked yet?
That's the Tommy G section of the planning. I will leave that to the professionals.
So, Pete, do we know if there's a line on this yet of of will it happen or won't it happen? Because won't it happen, it's probably like a solid minus 1,000 right now. But let's say it does happen. Are you calling yourself the favorite in this fight?
Oh, man, you can't put enough zeros behind my name when you're making the odds for this fight. I'm thinking I don't know, starting at maybe minus 1,000 up to minus 10,000. There's just no way. I think I'm actually a favorite not to even get hit once in the entire fight.
So,
can I get odds on that right now before we get off the air?
Yeah, we'll discuss it.
Oh yeah. That's what we call the back pedal for those of you new to the biz.
So, Siege, it sounds like you're like the Conor McGregor versus Floyd Mayweather in this fight, if I believe DC.
Well, I mean, sure. If DC wants to be the side that gets all the public money, that's fine by me. I'll take all the sharp money. I think it opens. DC's probably like minus 500 to open the fight, and I think you're going to see the public flow in on DC, and the sharp money is going to take me, and we'll see what happens on fight night.
Do you guys have a catch weight you're coming down to? Because Pete, it looks like, from the last time I saw you in person, it looks like you've been training.
Yeah, been training at the kitchen table. That's for sure. No doubt about that. Just trying to get up to, a kind of where I'm not at such a big size disadvantage, hitting the gym, hitting the weights, hitting the food, and getting ready to knock Siege's ass out. Yeah, no doubt about it.
I guess my only other question is, I know the rules of the fight haven't been established yet, but, why boxing? Why not, MMA? And if it's going to be boxing, is it going to be, Olympic-style boxing where you're wearing the helmets? No
helmets. And I'm definitely open to MMA.
What is this nonsense? We're going to wear the helmets. Yeah, Olympic style. Come on, get out of here.
No.
And if it was MMA, DC would be drawing dead. There's certain things that I wasn't going to torture the guy. Come on.
What would be your move in MMA?
There's a reason they have weight classes. I'll just leave it at that.
They didn't always have weight classes in the UFC. When Dan Severn was in it, they didn't have weight classes. They fought till the death.
You UFC one, you got the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, yeah.
So I guess this is really playing to Siege's jiu-jitsu background disadvantage here.
Exactly. No, yeah. I'm open to whatever. It doesn't really matter how this fight goes down. I don't think it's going to matter too much to me. The result's going to end up being the exact same.
All right.
I feel sorry for you, DC, because you're just setting the expectations bar so high for the general public, and it's going to be just a really big fall for you. Kind of like when you hike those mountains, one of those type falls. Maybe like when you jump off a boat, if you get lucky.
Yeah.
Listen, as it pertains to the entire boat thing, Pete, I don't think that there's anything you could have done that is more iconic in the fantasy industry than that one move. You could win the next 8 millionaire makers. People would still remember that.
I've got a few things out there on my record that people are going to remember me by, and hopefully this fight with Siege will kind of not erase those memories, but move those into the background. And my new iconic moment will be Siege hitting the canvas.
So, like, I know if Tommy is going to be behind, like, promoting this fight, and he truly is the Don King of fantasy, is there going to be, like, an undercard? Are people going to have to, like, buy it? Is it going to be, like, streamed on Periscope? Do we have logistics of this? Because I assume Mad Lab's going to be the ring announcer, but I'd like to throw my hat in as being, like, a guy who wears a tux to intro the fight.
There's a lot of people out there trying to get a little piece of this fight. I assume that there'll be a couple undercard fights. I don't know exactly who they will be. It'll be announced. We'll rent some venue, probably in Las Vegas, and this is going to get a lot of viewers, however it's streamed, whether that's Periscope or some minor pay-per-view thing or whatever it is.
I love when Tommy was like, "This will be under 50 people there." That was definitely one of the worst lines I've ever heard.
Oh no, I can see it being well under 50 people, and where this
no
is,
chance, Pat.
No chance. Yeah.
Where this is impossible to be sanctioned, that you're gonna have to like rent a yacht and go out to international waters. I don't think that the Wi-Fi out there is all that hot.
It doesn't need to be sanctioned, man. We'll just rent a gym. It'll be fine.
All right. Let's talk about the Week 16 slate, and then we'll circle back. Maybe you guys can have some good shit talk in between. That's really what I'm here for. So running backs for the main slate on DraftKings on Sunday. I believe it's a 12-game slate this week. 12 games, 13 games. We got, where's this? 12-game slate. Here we go. Zeke is, I think, the best play on the slate, although he is not the most expensive. That would be Todd Gurley with the knee injury at 92. So you got Zeke, Gurley, Christian McCaffrey at 88, and Barkley's all the way down at 79 with Chubb and Kamara at 73 and 74, Joe Mixon at 71, and James Conner potentially returning at $7,000. Siege. Is the move, again, to build up with double running backs here, or is there one guy in particular from up here that you really love?
I mean, Dallas is pretty simple. Like, if they are playing a man defense, you just load up on them. And if they're playing zone, you just avoid. Like, last week we saw Dak look absolutely clueless against zone defense. And, like, they would have been lucky if they had gotten any points, and they obviously didn't. Tampa, pretty zone heavy as well. Now, granted, Tampa's terrible. I'll probably stay away from Zeke and probably go to that next tier, the Kamara, Chubb, Mixon tier. I think that's pretty strong, and I don't think the gap between Elliott and those guys is worthy of that 16 to 1900 difference.
Pete, are you on the same page as it pertains to constructing tournament lineups here? Or do you think the move is to, let's say Gurley plays and he has this knee injury. No one's going to want to take him, but it's against Arizona, which is like the primo matchup of the century. Do you just take Gurley and hope no one else has him?
Yeah, I mean, if Gurley, is active, I have no issue using him against Arizona in what should be a game that the Rams control, though obviously we've seen their offense falter a little bit down the stretch after losing Cooper Kupp. I think Zeke Elliott's the best play on the board if we're just talking, kind of raw fantasy points, excluding ownership, excluding price, just who's going to score the most points. Give me Zeke Elliott over any of these guys. And, we are getting to the point of the year where teams are starting to get eliminated from playoff contention. We've seen Christian McCaffrey not come off the field for 3 straight weeks, but with the Panthers, pretty much out of it. You have to wonder if that's going to continue. Kind of the same thing for Saquon Barkley. A little bit worried about him going into Indianapolis, where they've really shut down some teams over the course of the year. So a little bit sketchy at the top. I think Zeke, I feel the most comfortable with. Great matchup, and then the Cowboys obviously still have a lot to play for.
I'm with you. I have Zeke rated out as my number 1 running back for this week, but it's close with a lot of these guys. Siege, what do you make of Christian McCaffrey here that, maybe Pete's right, maybe they scale back his workload just a little bit, like if you drop him from 100% of the snaps to 80% of the snaps, it would have a minimal decrease in his overall production. But let's say Cam looks like he's going to play, and we know he's hurt. Let's say he doesn't play. Does that affect McCaffrey at all, or does that just give him more touches? I
would raise McCaffrey's projection if Newton sat. That's how hurt he is. He can't throw the ball more than 10 yards down the field. So I know Taylor Hinkie is nothing special, but like at least there's a threat that he can throw the ball more than 10 yards down the field. So I would probably raise McCaffrey's projection in that scenario.
The Cam thing's interesting. I mean, just watching him play, like he's clearly in a ton of pain. I mean, Siege is right. He really can't get the ball downfield at all. And you would think at some point defenses would adjust and crowd the line of scrimmage, double team McCaffrey, because none of the other receivers are a threat. Like you just can't even get him the ball. So I'm just worried about that offense in general, which, you could argue that helps McCaffrey because Cam's like the only one that he can throw the ball to just physically, but it's enough for me to have Zeke comfortably over McCaffrey this week.
You bring up Indianapolis shutting down running backs as it pertains to Saquon Barkley, and they're out of it. But I think that there is a path where if Baker Mayfield if he has 2 hot games to end the year, there's the potential, not a large potential, that somehow Baker ends up winning Rookie of the Year, and I don't think that the Giants want that. So I think that they're going to continue to pound Barkley into the ground, continue to see what sort of numbers that he can pile up. But I think that everyone's kind of terrified of this Indianapolis matchup after watching what they did to Zeke last week. Pete, is he going to be the lowest owned, do you think, of these like top 8 running backs?
I don't know. I mean, we're getting a nice price discount. We're saving over $1,000 on DraftKings from going from Elliott to Barkley. And obviously people are very price sensitive when it comes to NFL DFS. So I think you'll still see a fair amount of people on Barkley. Indianapolis does give up a fair amount of receptions to opposing running backs. And I don't know if Odell Beckham is going to play, but if he doesn't, I mean, even last week, Barkley totally busted, but he did get 10 targets. So the Giants haven't shown any indication that they're going to scale Barkley back. That's just kind of speculation on my part as we get to the closing weeks of the season. Just makes me a little bit nervous. Whereas Zeke Elliott, I mean, he's getting 25 plus touches this week.
Siege, in that middle range that you talked about, the lower tier of the high-end running backs, your Kamaras, your Mixons, Chubbs, and even James Conner, who looks like he's going to return all in that lower $7,000 area. Do you have one in particular you like the most? Because for me, it's just really shaping up to be Nick Chubb.
Yeah, I love Nick Chubb this week. I think that's going to be a pretty commonly held opinion. I mean, this is a guy who's been getting about 20 touches a week now ever since he took over this job. And this Cincinnati defense is awful. And he's had some tough matchups these last few weeks, Houston, Carolina, and Denver. And if we remember what he did in that Cincinnati game, I mean, Nick Chubb could have put up as many fantasy points as he wanted. Ended up with 27.8 DK points, but I mean, it could have easily been 40. So I think Nick Chubb will be one of the higher owned running backs this week. And quite honestly, I'm fine with that.
So you would take him over Kamara? Because I would.
I think I would too. The Saints are just interesting because like they just kind of just put on the brakes last week and like, go ahead, Cam, prove that you can go down and score. And obviously he couldn't. So, but against Pittsburgh, I'm not sure they can kind of be as conservative as they were on Monday Night Football. So we might see more Kamara. Like the price on Kamara, he can win you a tournament at this price pretty easily. So I think Chubb has the higher projection, but I think Kamara might even have the higher ceiling.
Potentially, but I mean, you can throw Mixon into that. I was going to say Mix as well, as terms of a ceiling player in a pretty reasonable matchup against Cleveland. It's not as good as Chubb's matchup on the other side of the ball against that Cincinnati defense. But Pete, I'm going to throw in Connor and Dalvin Cook, who's at Detroit this week, into that whole scene as well. Do you have one out of those 5 that you really prefer, or do you think it's a more of an ownership move? Like, not all these guys can be super owned, and I kind of agree with Siege that Chubb's going to be the most popular. I think that Elliott's going to be the most popular at the top. So you're going to see a lot of builds that are Elliott, then Chubb, then probably like Jamal Williams or potentially Marlon Mack down where they are. And that the combination of those 4 guys is going to be uber popular. Do you have any sort of takes from this range?
Yeah, so I like Chubb too. Obviously the matchup against Cincinnati is a good one, but a little concerned about Chubb's, not his carry workload, but the pass volume. I mean, he really hasn't gotten more than 3 targets for the majority of his games. And then last week, a game that was close the whole way, Duke Johnson came in for 39% of those snaps, was on the field for almost every third down in hurry-up situations. And we don't expect many of those against Cincinnati, but that is a concern with Chubb. He's not, an every down workhorse type back. Obviously getting all the carries, but Duke Johnson, despite not getting many touches, is on the field for a good portion of the Brown snap. So that's a concern for me. I still do like Chubb, but my favorite running back on the entire slate is Dalvin Cook, going up against a Detroit defense that is a little bit improved, but For me, Cook is still very, very underrated as a talent. He missed, obviously, last year with the ACL injury, came back, had a slow start this year, was kind of on and off the field, but he's looked awesome these last couple of games. Obviously had a spectacular week 15, and I think we're going to continue to see the same thing. We're talking about teams that have something to play for. The Vikings right up there with kind of the top of that list. Must-win game going into a Detroit team that is sort of kind of in tank mode at this point. And Cook's been spectacular. I know, if you look at like the snap shares last week, they don't look super great for Cook. I think like 65% of the snaps, but a lot of that was the fourth quarter. They had a huge lead. Latavius Murray kind of ran out the clock for them. So Cook, for me, I think is going to kind of carry the backfield for Minnesota. He looks awesome. I like the matchup against Detroit, and I like that Minnesota is motivated as anybody to win this game.
From just an overall Week 16 strategy, if you're going to try to play for the top of these tournaments, do you think it's better to, like we talk about Zeke in terms of raw points, he is projected to score the most. He has a fantastic matchup. He has the workload. He's involved in the receiving game. He gets all the goal line work minus whatever Dak Prescott tries to audible to and take himself. Stealing our Zeke touchdowns is what Dak wants to do. But do you think it's a move where I talked about Gurley and that knee injury, that's going to kill ownership? Barkley, not in a great spot, coming off a bad week. He won't be as highly owned as probably he would in a regular week. And then you have Dalvin Cook, who's just sort of below these guys that I don't think that he's going to carry the ownership, and the perception around the Lions defense is that the run defense has been significantly better since they got Snacks Harrison like 6 weeks ago. But the other guy that's right there is James Conner. Do you have any feel for if there's going to be a split of any sort with Ridley and Jalen Samuels, or does this just go back, Pete, to the James Conner show? And if that's the case, you're looking at like 25 touches.
I mean, you would have to. The best guess, I think, would be that Connor would take over that backfield, assuming he, gets in a good week of practice. Like he just dominated the touches, the snap share for Pittsburgh, and we've seen even with Jalen Samuels these last couple of weeks, Pittsburgh, they really do prefer just to ride one running back, whoever that may be for the week, and you'd have to think that would be James Conner, if he's back and healthy. So I think that's a good pivot for sure. And I'm with you. I think Dalvin Cook maybe flies just a little bit under the radar at his highest price point of the season. Generally, people don't want to pay that. So I think going, just a tier below the very top running backs could be a good game theory way to go this week.
Siege, what do you
I
make?
have a lot of concerns. I have a lot of concerns on Dalvin Cook, by the way. Like,
okay,
yeah, Murray did get some garbage time work, by the way, but like he also did get a first quarter touchdown. It's not like Dalvin Cook was getting all the work and then Murray came in and washed it up. Like if you're signing like like if you sign the Vikings 2 rushing touchdowns, I don't know if you can give Dalvin Cook more than like 70% of the rushing touchdowns, and that kind of just caps your ceiling on a week where this tier has a ton of ceiling. So like I think Dalvin Cook's floor is probably the highest, but I'm not so sure if the ceiling is quite there against a Detroit team that likes to slow the game down.
Watch the tape on Dalvin Cook. I think you'll change your mind.
I mean, he looked great. Like my problem isn't with Dalvin Cook. My problem is with the coaching staff, and will they just run him out there full speed?
He'll get series off from time to time. 1 in 4, 1 in 5 series off if this game is close, but I still think he's going to get 20 plus touches. They've talked about how they're going to ride him, to the finish. And I have so much confidence in Dalvin Cook and his involvement in this offense, how good he looks. I know Snacks Harrison is there playing nose tackle, but Cook does a lot of his damage on screen passes, on runs outside the tackles. I'm not as worried about that matchup for Cook as I would be, if Murray was a lead back or something like that.
Well, I mean, over the past 3 games, and we've seen 3 almost totally different types of game flow for the Minnesota Vikings. You have that New England game where they were behind in the second half. You have the Seattle game, which they got behind, but it was pretty close for most of the first half and then going into the third quarter. And then last week where they were just absolutely tuning the Dolphins at home. Now, they're 5-point favorites in Detroit this week. Like, he had 19 carries last week, only the 1 catch, but the 2 weeks before he had 5 receptions and 8 receptions, Siege. It seems like it's difficult to really take him out of the game. In fact, he might be he might be a better play in games that are either closer or even that they're losing. I know last week he scored the 2 touchdowns after breaking the big one, but I think that might be the path to unlocking Dalvin Cook here. So even if Detroit slows the game down, if they can keep it close, that could benefit Dalvin Cook because, yeah, he might not have the greatest market share of the goal line touches compared to some of these other guys, but I mean, it's no worse than like what Kamara has with Ingram or even potentially Duke Johnson getting stuck on the field in terms of Chubb. You would expect Chubb to get those, but Dalvin Cook's receiving upside as it pertains to touchdowns is something I don't think you can overlook.
True, but like also Adam Thielen's been awful these 2 weeks. I don't expect that to continue either. So it just comes down to I think that this is an offense that we're evaluating off of a 34 carry week, and I just don't think you realistically can count on 34 carries a week, especially when you have Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen out there. And look, like this is an offense that definitely needs to win, but they also need to get ready for the playoffs, and they need to be more balanced. So I worry that we're kind of just buying high on Cook here when there's a bunch of red flags. And I'm really not as worried about Nick Chubb as you guys are. Like he was just awful until that fourth quarter. And I think that had a lot to do with the Duke workload. I don't think it really is if Nick Chubb is performing, Nick Chubb will be on the field. And honestly, if he's not performing, then you're not going to win with him anyways.
I'm not too concerned about Nick Chubb. I actually really like Nick Chubb here, but I think if we're trying to find a path to the most touches and the most upside, I think that when it all boils back to like these 5 guys, and I'll even throw in like Tariq Cohen, David Johnson into this mix too, because they're in the $6,000 level. With Johnson, that offense is just so putrid. You really wonder about his upside, even though he might get like 30 garbage time catches in this matchup, unless they don't want to hurt him. They bring in Chase Edmonds, but Mixon and Connor seem to be the 2 who have the path to all of the workload, all of the goal line work, and all of the catches if things break right for them. And I don't know if I can say that about everyone else.
Yeah, I agree with that. I definitely do. I think you'd even put Marlon Mack in that category. If
He's down. We'll get to Marlon Mack here in a second because there's 3 guys down below that I think that everyone's just going to gravitate towards, and I'm kind of curious of how you guys would handle it as it pertains to large-scale GPPs like the Millionaire Maker. So, Pete, you got Marlon Mack. He's $5,500. You have Jamal Williams. He's $5,400. And then you have Elijah McGuire, who's $4,700 in a good matchup against the Packers. All 3 of those guys are going to carry ownership this week. And I'll even throw Tevin Coleman into that mix too, with Judge Ito now placed on the IR and Jeremy Langford or Brian Hill potentially backing him up. He's $4,800. And that's against Carolina, a much worse matchup than the other 3 that we just talked about. But are those guys going to cancel each other out in terms of ownership, or do you see one guy really getting all the helium here and getting like piled onto that leaves the other guys like, are people going to go Mack over Jamal Williams full stop, and it's going to make Mack super highly owned, Williams lower owned, or what's going to happen here?
I think you're going to see too many people play Williams for my liking. I'm not going to use Jamal Williams, just not a talented running back against a Packers team that's, it seems like most likely going to be without Aaron Rodgers. I think people are going to like think that's a good thing for Jamal Williams. I completely disagree with anyone that has that take. Obviously, Aaron Jones is out, but I don't think Green Bay is going to rely on Jamal Williams to carry 100% of the rushing load or 100% of the snaps or really anything close to that. I know they don't have a lot behind Jamal Williams, but teams find other guys to use. So for me, Marlon Mack is my favorite play among these guys. If we think the Indianapolis Colts are going to have their way with the Giants offense, which I think is a reasonable take to have. In those types of games where the Colts have kind of controlled things, we've seen Marlon Mack have huge rushing carries, big gains, touchdowns, talented guy. And then the matchup with the Giants really can't be much better for a team that will run the ball if they're ahead. So for me, Marlon Mack is the way I would go among those 3 guys.
Siege?
I mean, I would never roster a running back that's going to have DeShone Kizer as his quarterback. So
are we convinced that Rodgers is going to sit? Like, that's not official as we speak right now.
I mean, Joe Philbin just said I can't commit to Aaron Rodgers playing on Sunday. Like the Packers have been out of contention so often the last few years. We have a pretty good track record of the moment they're done, he sits, and I don't really see any reason why they would change that now.
Okay, let's live in a world where he does play. Then would that change anything for you?
I still wouldn't play Jamal Williams. He's just not very good at football. Like I would play Elijah McGuire because like if we get DeShone Kizer, like that's good for an extra red zone or 2 possession for the Jets. And he's been talented like when he's been on the field, and you give him an opportunity to get extra touchdowns and he could put up a monster game.
Okay, so of the cheapy guys, like Chris, if LaShawn McCoy sits and Chris Ivory plays, he's $3,900. Kalen Ballage is $3,700 for the Dolphins against Jacksonville. But the other one could be if there's some sort of case where this knee inflammation is too much and Todd Gurley ends up sitting. Pete, do you just go to John Kelly?
I think you certainly can. I kind of like Ballage a little bit. He looked pretty good last week. He's got good measurables, looked good out of the combine, and looks like he'll carry the load. They just don't want to use Kenyon Drake for whatever reason. Buffalo Bills running backs, that's going to be a pass for me, even if Ivory's there. It's just a Josh Allen show right now in Buffalo. I'm not going to use their running backs at all.
Siege, any interest in those cheap guys, or do you think that's just too low to go build?
Boy, John Kelly looked real bad last week.
On his 2 carries?
No, he looked lost. Like just even when he was out there, like he didn't know where to go. Maybe a week of practice helps that, and maybe if the team has longer Todd Gurley concerns that this could linger into the playoffs, then maybe they just have to get him ready and give him a big workload. But I think that's one of the things that we'll kind of hear throughout the week. I don't think you have to really make that decision now. If I did, I would probably lean to stay away. But like if I heard more positive reports about practice, then yeah, I definitely could see myself getting on there. They're going to be a massive favorite, and they're going to score some points this week. I would like to think so. It kind of a wait and see approach for me on John Kelly.
All right, last one I want to talk about at running back in almost the spirit of being a little bit contrarian that no one wants to play this guy, and he has a fantastic matchup. I know they're 4-point dogs in Miami, but Leonard Fournette, what's going on with his touches right now? Was he being punished last week for yelling at fans? Why did he only get the one carry in the second half? Like, if he just returns to normal Fournette workload this week, he has a glorious matchup, and no one is going to touch him here.
Didn't they say that like it was part of the game plan for him not to touch the ball in the second half?
That doesn't even make sense.
Yeah, you are. It's simple. They want a better draft pick. That's how it makes sense.
So they want a better draft pick. So what? They can just draft another running back highly? Like, what's their draft capital at?
I mean, they're a bad team. And why would you run him into the ground? Fournette has a ton of injury history. Like, why would you risk it? Like, he could easily DNP here. Like, I would not be surprised if we woke up Sunday morning and he was inactive. I think that's more likely than him getting the full workload back.
Pete?
Yeah, I'll agree with Siege here. I mean, $6K for Leonard Fournette, that looks like a super enticing price point, but I just don't trust the Jaguars. I don't trust Leonard Fournette in general. I don't play him very often. There's just always something with him. The injury histories, gets ejected, suspensions. The Jaguars sometimes phase him out of games. They fall behind, and I don't even think he's all that good of a player, honestly. Like, he has like very little elusiveness. He needs kind of a big seam to. Now, obviously, he can use his speed at that point, but just not a Leonard Fournette guy. And I mean, I'm telling you, in week 16, week 17, when some of these teams that have no incentive to win, I'll take the sure things. Guys like Dalvin Cook, Nick Chubb, teams that are clearly trying to win at this point are the guys that I want to roster.
Switch to wide receivers. Julio is back on top of DraftKings pricing in week 16 at the wide receiver on the main slate. He's $8,700. Then you got Hopkins, Adams, Antonio Brown, Michael Thomas, and Juju all above $8,000. Then Thielen, Odell Beckham, Amari Cooper, Stefan Diggs, Julian Edelman, T.Y. Hilton in the $7,000 range. I'm just taking a quick look at this. It's going to be tough if Aaron Rodgers doesn't play to roster any Devontae Adams. So I think I might just own as much DeAndre Hopkins as possible and figure out the rest of my wide receivers elsewhere. What do you think, Pete?
He seems like the best play, right? Hopkins at wide receiver, Zeke at running back. Those two guys kind of stick out to me, at least in a cash game build as guys you'd want to roster. Obviously, the Eagles, they've shown up the last couple of weeks, but that secondary is still extremely banged up. They don't have anybody to slow down DeAndre Hopkins, who just what a fantastic player he is. So, yeah, I'm in on Hopkins. Would not touch Devontae Adams if Aaron Rodgers doesn't play. And frankly, even if he does, I don't think I would go there. Julio is fine, but another one that you kind of worry about the motivations of Atlanta for a player like Julio Jones, who, has had some injury issues over the years. And then, the Pittsburgh guys. I know they busted to some extent in that disappointing game against New England last week, but could definitely be a shootout in New Orleans. So I don't mind going back to either Antonio Brown or Juju Smith-Schuster. I think I would slightly lean Smith-Schuster due to matchup there.
I would lean Juju as well versus Antonio Brown. But Siege, you brought up Thielen earlier, and there's no way he can continue to be bad. Would he be the first receiver that you would go to on this slate to pay up, or would you go even higher than him?
I mean, Hopkins is definitely the best option. I think we can pretty much all agree on that. But I think Michael Thomas is the second best. Like, we've seen this Pittsburgh defense love to play slots with linebackers. And if you put a linebacker on Michael Thomas, it's going to end up exactly the same way it worked out with Keenan Allen. And Mike Tomlin is just stubborn. He just does it. He doesn't like getting out of base. And I know that the Saints haven't been throwing the ball a ton, and people are just going to react to that. But the Chargers weren't really throwing the ball a ton until they had played Pittsburgh. I think that matchup is just too good to pass up. And what I think will be pretty suppressed ownership by Michael Thomas coming off a few pretty depressing games. I think the ceiling here is phenomenal for him.
Pete, you study the tape of the Vikings pretty closely as someone who is from that sort of part of the country. Now, last week, and maybe this was just due to game flow, but they bring in a new OC, and all of a sudden they're bringing Diggs into the slot to get him off of matchups and bumping Thielen to the outside. Do you think that's something that continues, and would that make Diggs a better play than Thielen?
I honestly like both guys. I don't think I would use them on the same lineup, and I'm not sure I would use them. Maybe you could use them with Dalvin Cook if you wanted to, but right now I do have a lot of faith in the Vikings offense overall, and I kind of want pieces of the three main weapons. Obviously, that's Thielen, Diggs, and then Dalvin Cook at running back. I know they had a kind of a slow week last week, and they've not been great recently, but I think they have another big week on offense against Detroit. I think they put up 30-plus points, and you got to think that Thielen and Diggs are going to have a big part of that. No issue going Diggs over Thielen. I think especially now that their price points are, closer together on DraftKings than they've been over the last, couple of months at least. I do think people will maybe take a shot on Thielen over Diggs. So I like both guys, but yeah, I think using Diggs over Thielen is certainly a viable way to go.
If we use the Amari Cooper flow chart that no one believes he goes off, no one believes he goes off, some people are in, he goes off, everyone's in, he puts up an absolute fucking dud. So now that everyone is sort of off of him again in a pretty good matchup against the Bucks at home, Siege, is this the time to go back to Amari Cooper, or you just leave him off? Or has he become like Tyreek Hill, that if you're playing multiple lineups in GPPs, he's always just a guy to have in your player pool because of his upside?
I just won't touch the Dallas wide receiver versus zone defense. Like, this is an Evan Silva stat that he got from SIS. It's just like the splits. I don't think Dak's thrown a touchdown yet against his own defense, and we're in past week 15. Like, that's a problem for the Amari Cooper ceiling at 7,500.
Which zone defenses has he played so far this season?
Let's see. I don't think
Come on, see, you're overstating the zone defense thing. Let's get real here.
He's thrown 0 touchdowns. We are in week 15 or week 16.
Well, every team kind of goes back and forth between zone and man. It's not like I would need some.
They're a heavy zone team. It's called the Tampa 2 for a reason, Pete. Like, they run a lot of zone.
Because Tony Dungy was there like 12 years ago. Like,
they've still been running a ton this year. Like, it's not like it. I mean, Cam Newton also historically struggles. Same deal in Tampa. Like, I and you're paying the ceiling price for Amari Cooper. I don't want a matchup that I have questions about.
I'll take some Amari at 7,500 for sure.
Amari Cooper definitely has burned me a couple of the last few weeks, but the last 2.5 years have been a wonderful ride. So
when we think about these receivers that we're talking about here at the high end, and like you can even mix in, like I said, like Mike Evans. I prefer Robert Woods over Brandon Cooks, if that's a path you want to go to, because I don't think a lot of people are going to be on the Rams receivers. T.Y. Hilton's right there. Julian Edelman against Buffalo. That seems like the preferred matchup of any receiver from the slot against the Bills, especially at home. But we just talked about all these running backs that, yes, there are paid down running backs like your McGuire's, your Marlon Max, and even Jamal Williams and Tevin Coleman. But it does seem like more people are going to pay up at running back than pay up at receiver. How many of these guys in a lineup, Pete, do you think you can realistically jam in? Just the one?
Yeah, I mean, one is kind of typically the way to go, but I do think, we kind of poked holes in some of those elite running backs, worried a little bit about possibly diminished workloads, worried about quarterback play, about matchups. So I do think this is a week where it wouldn't be the craziest thing to get contrarian and pay up for a couple of these studs, because most of these guys, I think the Pittsburgh guys, Michael Thomas, DeAndre Hopkins, the Vikings players, Amari Cooper, they're all in pretty good spots.
And that's what we saw last week, Siege, when the Millionaire Maker was just contrarian, high-end wide receivers on the team, or sprinkled in with the running backs that no one wanted. Like you had Galladay, you had Julio Jones on that team. Just it's not that people were off of them, just they weren't the super chalky types of plays. It was almost the inverse roster construction to what everyone was preaching last week. So do you think it's viable to pay up for 2 wide receivers and pay down at running back? Because I do feel more comfortable with some of the more pay down running backs than I do with the pay down wide receivers.
I kind of like paying down at quarterback, to be honest. Well, and there's a bunch of like cheap tight ends you can use. Like, I think you might be able to squeeze in some of these elite running backs and receivers and just give it up everywhere else.
So if it was the 2 you had to jam in from above $7,000, which 2 would it be?
Running back and receivers total?
Just wide receivers. We'll talk wide receivers. Hopkins.
Oh, Thomas and Hopkins for sure.
Thomas and Hopkins. Pete, where do you think you would go?
Thomas and Hopkins is where I would go in cash games, but I think we're going to see really low ownership on Thielen and Diggs. So I would choose one of those guys, not sure exactly which one I'll use yet. And if I don't have Zeke Elliott on that team, I think Amari Cooper would be the way to go. I think I'll have Cooper or Zeke on most of my rosters.
So
you think Thomas is going to be popular at DC? Because I don't think he's going to be popular at all.
Yeah, he will be. Why wouldn't he be? I think that's the highest total on the entire slate. He's the number 1 option. There's no other Saints wide receiver to use really at this point. And then people are kind of hesitant to use Kamara or Ingram with both of those guys splitting snaps. So I think Thomas is going to carry that Saints ownership.
Oh, I think it's going to be Kamara at 74. I think people are going to see that price and just ride him up there.
I think you're going to find that this game in general is far more owned than a lot of people think. It's the highest projected point total game on the slate by 6 points.
That's all people care about, right? Is the highest total game, and everyone just loads up on it. We saw it with Pittsburgh, New England last week. We'll see it again with Pittsburgh and New Orleans here. I mean, it's not like these teams are low-profile teams in a high total game, right? They're extremely high-profile teams in a high total game. Everybody is going to load up on New Orleans and Pittsburgh.
See, I just think right in between Antonio and Juju, I think you're going to see people just go Kamara and pick one of those receivers because it's tough to fit Thomas and a Pittsburgh receiver together. So I think you're going to see people use a running back with a Pittsburgh receiver way more than the reverse of like Connor Thomas. I think that's going to be like the more contrarian approach within that game.
If you take Kamara, Juju, and Michael Thomas all in one lineup, you have $4,400 left from your average player spot. So if you end up paying down at quarterback, tight end, and get your defense in, you're still around like $6,000 per player. That means you could pay down at another spot for a cheap receiver or running back and pay up for another one of these guys. It's possible, and your team wouldn't look that bad.
I think it's a pretty good way to go, honestly. And we're going to get more value that emerges, I think, at running back throughout this week as we get more injury news, just because of kind of the nature of where we are in the season. You know, some teams have playoff positioning locked up. Others are incentivized to lose at this point. They're going to go to younger players. As we get later in the season, I think we're going to see more and more stars and scrubs types of builds become popular and become optimal. And I think people are definitely going to load up on the big games like Pittsburgh and New Orleans, just like we saw last week with Pittsburgh and New England.
Well, we'll get to stacks towards the end, but I mean, that's very clearly the game that people are going for. Maybe they'll even take some of the periphery pieces to try to save money if they want to get a pure game stack here. I don't love the periphery pieces, even at wide receiver from the Saints side, just because you never know who it's going to be. That the potential for having just a big fat zero in your lineup isn't great. I actually don't love Michael Thomas all that much. Just the Saints offense I find very confusing, that not ever since Ingram has returned in week 5, that it's been so spread out amongst everyone. Like sometimes it's a running game. Sometimes they're passing to Tommy Lee Lewis and Kirk Woodson, or whatever the hell his name is. There's just so much going around that the market share of targets, especially the important targets, isn't really funneling to the 2 guys that we want them to. So I even think someone like Julio in a pay up spot here, because we're just kind of just glossing over him. He's the most expensive. You can pay down for equal options, but he lights up Carolina.
You're assuming he plays. Like I'm not sure he's going to play.
When do we see it? Like you're talking like every year we go into week 16 and then people are just out. Like that doesn't happen.
Sure seems it like it does every year. Like the studs that have nothing to play for that have injury history. We saw it with Fournette last week.
We don't even know if that was actually the case or not. That's just what you're projecting onto the situation.
What do you mean? Leonard Fournette said the game plan that he was not going to touch the ball in the second half. What do you mean? Like that came out.
So Leonard Fournette says that. You believe Leonard Fournette at his word? You don't think that's just sort of...
Why would he lie?
I mean, I guarantee you it has more to do with disciplinary matters than maybe more people are reading into.
Then why did he get all the carries in the first half? Like that makes, if you're going to discipline a guy, you discipline him in the first half, not the second half.
Well, he said they might be trying to tank here. I don't know what that situation was. That just seems very bizarre. Like, why, if that was the case, why even have him active in the first place?
I mean, that's a fair point, but teams aren't exactly optimal, as we've learned a long time ago from coaching decisions.
All right, $5,000 to $7,000 wide receivers. The Rams guys are in there. I like Robert Woods. Kenny Golladay really came through in a just terrible spot last week against the Bills. He led a lot of people because no one was on him to some pretty high cashes. Is there anyone in that range you feel particularly good about? Because I know that people are going to gravitate towards Alshon here with Nick Foles back under center. The Houston secondary, not the best, Pete. But does anyone really just do it for you here, or is this just a fade range?
This is an ugly range, isn't it? I mean, I think you can go to some of these guys. Like Alshon Jeffrey is an interesting play. I actually don't mind going back to Kenny Golladay. It feels a little bit, like you're chasing points after that kind of big game that nobody was on against Buffalo. But like I said, I mean, I really expect Minnesota to put up a bunch of points on Detroit and put up, frankly, a bunch of points in a hurry. I think Minnesota is going to get off to a very fast start against the Lions defense, and that should lead to a lot of Detroit throwing the ball. I'm not all that scared of Minnesota's pass defense at this point. Xavier Rhodes, not the same player he used to be. So, yeah, going back to Kenny Golladay, I think is kind of interesting at 6K. I mean, that dude he's a number one wide receiver. Like going forward, he's going to have a big few years coming up here. So I like betting on talent, and Golladay, certainly a guy you could use at 6K.
Hey, would Golladay be your preferred play, Siege, from that range?
I think I would probably play Calvin Ridley first. You talked about the Carolina secondary not being as good as we expect, and I don't necessarily know how big of a part of the game plan Julio Jones would be. Calvin Ridley is a freak athlete in a really good situation here. 5K can really put up a lot of ceiling. If I was going to stop in this range, he would probably be the guy that I would take a look at.
All right, sub 5K, Siege. Is there anyone in particular you're looking at? Because Sterling Shepard without OBJ really hasn't been all that good, so I don't know, even if Beckham returns, how fantastic I feel about that. I kind of like Adam Humphries at $4,700 here. If you expect Byron Jones to take away Mike Evans and or Chris Godwin, depending on if Deshaun Jackson plays, that Adam Humphries just might be running free, and attacking Dallas in the slot is usually pretty profitable.
Yeah, I don't mind him, but honestly, the under 5K wide receiver tier is pretty loaded.
So let's talk about the guy then. The 29% market share the past 2 weeks since returning to full health. Robbie Anderson is $4,500. That's the guy,
Like
right?
that's the best of the options down here, and against the Green Bay secondary that isn't very good, has nothing to play for, probably won't be playing with much urgency. This is kind of a big spot for Sam Darnold, so I like this Darnold to Robbie Anderson stack, obviously. But the guy I think that's probably the best ceiling guy is John Ross at 3,800.
I just worry that he's not good.
Sure, but there is no one left. We're going to find out one way or another, I think, this week.
I don't think you just have to worry about that. I think that's pretty much true with John Ross at this point. I'm with you guys. I think Robbie Anderson is the play here. He's kind of got a nice floor, right? 7+ targets in each of the last 3 weeks. The Jets certainly want to win. Give Sam Darnold some confidence going into next year. Robbie Anderson looks like his very clear number one target at this point. 4,500 just seems too cheap in a nice spot for the Jets. And then I kind of like the Buffalo wide receivers, man. Josh Allen, he got a lot of heat. The Buffalo Bills did for drafting him, but I think Josh Allen might be pretty good. And I'll take a shot on some Robert Foster, Isaiah McKenzie. I kind of like Buffalo a little bit going into New England.
I kind of like
I can't believe McKenzie returned, by the way. I thought that for sure.
It was insane that he ended up coming back. So do you have a preference between the three guys? Obviously, Foster's the most expensive. He's probably the best play. But if that's the case, and he's their actual number one, would Zay Jones, who's now at his lowest price in ages, be the one to go back to?
Yeah, you could. Zay Jones is another one of those guys like John Ross, who I think at this point looks like he just kind of sucks. Like he's got one of the lowest catch rates in the league the last couple of years. Part of that obviously is, who's been throwing him the ball, but Robert Foster has had more success. And then Isaiah McKenzie, he got off to a really good start. I was on him last week. Ended up catching 6 balls for 53 yards, but he only played on 51% of the snaps. I think he missed, I think he would have been up near 70, 80% of the snaps if he didn't miss any time. So, yeah, McKenzie would be my preferred option there. He's also involved in the rushing game, which could be even more true this week with how thin Buffalo is at running back. So McKenzie's my guy there. I think next would be Foster, and then Zay Jones would be third for me.
Yeah, Isaiah McKenzie is in a good spot against New England because we know that he's going to play the slot, and you're not going to see any bracket coverage. You're not going to see Stephen Gilmore really take anyone out from the slot, so it would be McKenzie, and those are pretty easy completions for Josh Allen as well. And with his speed, like we think of Robert Foster, he gets behind the defense after Josh Allen buys some time, and he's just wide open 60 yards down the field, which is basically a pitch for Josh Allen. He can get the ball out there. But if you can get Isaiah McKenzie into space, even on one of these reverses, he too has enough speed to be a real game breaker and score a long touchdown. So if you can get him that volume and play him around 75% of the snaps, I do think he is a really solid play here, though. But Pete, if Robbie Anderson's going to be, right now I project him probably around like 20-25% in the Millionaire Maker. I'm never one to pay for chalky, low-end wide receivers, but is this too good of a spot to pass up?
Yeah, that percentage, I think, I think you can still play him there. The thing about Anderson is a lot of the chalky kind of low-end wide receivers, in general, they don't have a lot of upside, right? Oftentimes you're talking about slot wide receivers who maybe don't have explosiveness, but Anderson certainly has that. So I don't mind eating a little bit of chalk when a guy like Robbie Anderson's certainly capable of 100 yards and a touchdown or two, right? He can clearly get behind the defense and score from a long way out. So those are chalky wide receivers that I don't mind playing. Go ahead, Siege.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. As this just broke, Cam Newton is probably done for the season.
Yeah,
Hinky to start.
Expected to sit Cam Newton. Yeah, Ian Rappaport reports. So, again, that do we agree that increases or decreases Christian McCaffrey, or just makes him neutral?
Increases for sure.
I don't know if it does. The one thing I would say that you get taken away is Cam's rushing ability does open up fewer defenders for Christian McCaffrey to beat on the ground. And if you don't think that he's going to pile up double-digit targets, it could take away from his overall production just in general.
We're talking elite pass catching back versus Atlanta, though. Like, sure, there's risk there, but at this point, having someone that can actually throw the ball down the field, I think, is a win.
Pete, would you think that this increases the value of like a DJ Moore, Curtis Samuel, I was going to say Kelvin Benjamin, but Kelvin Benjamin 2.0, Devin Funchess, anyone like that, or just an avoid situation for the Carolina receivers?
Honestly, I mean, Cam looks so bad these last couple of weeks throwing the ball downfield that it almost has to be an upgrade, right? Like he literally couldn't get the ball downfield. Like there was no chance of getting it behind the defense or anything like that. So for me, it's an upgrade to those guys, and I'll disagree a little bit with Siege. I think a slight downgrade for McCaffrey. I mean, you can't really target McCaffrey more often than Cam Newton was, right? McCaffrey's like setting records for receptions for running back, and yes, you can say that's largely due to his skill set. I agree, fantastic receiver out of the backfield, but we don't know for sure that didn't have something to do with Cam Newton, who you're just checking down to McCaffrey over and over again. So I'll actually say a slight decrease in value for McCaffrey and a slight increase in value for the Carolina wide receivers.
Would it make you want to use any of the Carolina wide receivers?
DJ Moore would be the guy. He's my favorite Carolina wide receiver by far. He's the number one option there. And, he is a guy that kind of needs a decently strong arm quarterback. And I don't know. We'll see. But maybe now he has it. And then Curtis Samuels I like a lot too. I actually think I actually think the weapons that Carolina has, I think they're going to be a really good offense going forward, assuming Cam Newton can get that shoulder right.
One of the things that I would worry about amongst the Carolina wide receivers that some of their value is derived from running like jet sweeps and reverses, a lot of which are predicated on a strong running game and the ability for Cam Newton to keep the ball and run himself, that you can't just have defenders follow everyone across the field, and it opens up these huge running lanes on these reverses. So, Siege, when you hit enter on your lineups on Sunday, do you expect to see any Carolina Panthers wide receiver in them?
Yeah, I think there'll be some there. I'm not sure how much will be, but I think like if you once you start getting away from Pittsburgh, New Orleans, that Atlanta Carolina game kind of just does stare out as kind of the next game that kind of could shoot out. I see kind of the way that could go.
All right. Finally, at wide receiver, there's two guys in the lower $4,000 range that one of them is coming off two just horrendous games, and the other one's been good, but in a bad matchup. You have Chris Godwin, who this only pertains to if Deshaun Jackson sits once again against Dallas on the side of the field opposite of Byron Jones, I would expect. And then Dante Pettis against the Bears. Do you have any feel for those two guys, Siege?
I'm not a Pettis guy. He gets a ton of snaps. And
would you say that you're not a Pettis file?
I'm just gonna ignore that. If I was going down this far, I would go to like a Gallup, who I just think has talent and is good at football. I know he killed people last week, but I do think the targets were trending up before that, and I don't think it's going to stop now. I just think it kind of was one of those days for the Cowboys, and no one's going to go back to him, and he's got real talent.
So don't play wide receivers against the zone defense like Dallas, and then play Michael Gallup?
I mean, that's the issue, right? Like, that's the problem. But he's not a $3,500 receiver, right? He's in the world of like basically back end scrubs, like Cody Core and Keith Kirkwood and Russell Shepard, who like probably will be out of the league next year. Gallup has talent. Like, he's just in the wrong tier of pricing. So for me, I think that kind of like when you're going to take the risk, like there needs to be a ceiling. And for Cooper, it's a lot harder to pay off a ceiling at 7,500. For Gallup, a ceiling at 3,500 can simply be one play.
Pete, Pettis, Godwin, pass, or both?
I like both guys a little bit. I would lean Pettis. I know the matchup against the Bears is a tough one, but Kyle Shanahan, man, he schemes people open every week, no matter the opponent. We've seen Pettis. I mean, what has he had? 4 or 5 big games in a row. A talented guy. I like Pettis quite a bit. The matchup, again, on paper looks pretty bad, but I do think the best place to attack the Bears is on the perimeter, and Pettis, he's just clearly the number one wide receiver right now. He's getting targets every game. He's converting them into fantasy points. They're at home. I think Chicago will put up a decent amount of points in San Francisco. So I'll lean Pettis slightly over Godwin, but I don't mind going back to Godwin either. Another super talented guy. Should avoid Byron Jones for the most part. I think Byron Jones will mostly be on Mike Evans. That would make the most sense to me. So, yeah, I could see going back to Godwin and what could be a potential shootout, I think, in Dallas.
Well, that translates very good over into quarterbacks for the week. You have that Saints game with Ben and Breeze. I just play Josh Allen every week, so I might just continue to do that. And even, Belichick against rookie quarterback. Josh Allen's like no rookie quarterback we've seen. The guy's going to rush for 4,000 yards this game. Probably. Maybe not. But is there any one quarterback in particular, Siege, that you like? Because I think I'm prone to Andrew Luck here in a bounce-back spot.
I got to be honest. I really don't think I'm going to be in this 6K plus tier at all this week.
Then who's the play? Because if you say Sam Darnold, you're not allowed on the show anymore.
I mean, it's a really good spot for Sam Darnold.
Just
being honest. Green Bay has nothing to play for on the road. Like, this is one of those momentum builders for the Jets. Like, I think it's a really good spot for him, but there's also like 4 or 5 awesome, I wouldn't say awesome, viable pivots below him. These guys are all in good spots. Obviously, like Drew Brees, Big Ben will be the highest owned here. Andrew Luck against the Giants, we saw what happened last week when they got a lead. They just started running the ball. I question what that ceiling is against the Giants.
Yeah, but even in that game last week, T.Y. Hilton drops a touchdown. Marlon Mack runs it in the next play. Eric Ebron has a ball bounce out of his hands in the end zone. Like, there's 2 touchdowns. All of a sudden, he's the highest scoring quarterback on the slate.
That's like 20. He'd been at 22 points. Like,
which would have been the second highest scoring quarterback on the slate.
That was an wait, you're now going to start establishing like the baseline based off of one of the worst quarterback weeks.
No,
ever?
what I'm saying is that it was a game where they were effectively running the ball pretty well, but Luck still had his opportunities against a much better defense, especially a pass defense as well, in order to score, and things didn't break his way. I don't think just because Marlon Mack scored 2 touchdowns last week that all of a sudden they're just settling for field goals and rushing touchdowns against the Giants this week. I think they can pound them.
It's all about the ceiling, though, right? Like, if they're up 21-0, you probably want to have 3 passing touchdowns by that point.
I mean, does any quarterback in the league outside of Mahomes have more 3 passing touchdown games this year than Andrew Luck?
Yeah, but those were in competitive games, right? I don't think any of those were in routes. I could be wrong, but one was the Dolphins game, one was the Jaguars game, one was the Raiders game, one was that Tennessee game.
It's like every game, Siege.
Yeah, but like those were competitive games. I just don't. I think he's fine. Like, I'm not saying he's like I'm just not sure that he's going to go out there for 30 points. And I think there's just so many quarterbacks sub 5K that can go get me 20 to 22 that I'm really looking for this top tier to kind of get closer to 30 for me.
Okay, what if the league says that Sam Darnold can no longer have his therapy peacock on the sidelines with him, and that triggers him? Or he reads some sort of negative headline, and he's too triggered to play, and he has to go to his safe space. What happens then? Do you play Josh McCown?
I mean, I think I would play whoever the Jets ran at quarterback this week against this Packers team. Look, they just have absolutely nothing to play for.
All right.
And there's other options down here, too.
Like who? You play Holmes? Nick Mullins?
I think you could play Nick Foles. I think you could play Nick Mullins. I think you could play Cody Kessler. I think you could play Jeff Driscoll. I think they're all viable options.
Jesus Christ, Siege. Okay,
Pete. It's gonna be a rough Siege.
I get to pay up. I get to pay up for Hopkins, Thomas, Cook, and Chubb. I think I'll be okay.
Jeff Driscoll.
He's 4,600 though. Like, I'm not. Again, this Browns defense does give up points. Like, I know he's not good at throwing the football. I'll be the first to admit that, but you're also paying nothing for him. Like, 18 gets it done. I just don't think any of these quarterbacks are in these elite spots. Like, we talked about totals being way down this week. And if these elite quarterbacks aren't going to get you 3 touchdowns, what's the point?
I can get that reasoning, but is 18 really going to win you a tournament if you start Jeff Driscoll? If he can get to 18, if you're going to,
I'm going to need Hopkins to go bonkers. I'm going to need Thomas to go bonkers.
If you're going to besmirch the upside of Andrew Luck, a guy who has posted over 30 DraftKings points a bunch of times this year, and then be like, it was a good play, Cody Kessler.
You want to know how many times he's gone over 30 DK points, Pat? You said a bunch?
4. I want to say 4 this season.
Try 1.
Really? No, that's in my face then.
And that was the Houston game where he threw for 464 yards.
Which game was that? Was that the first one or second one?
The first one, week 4.
Yeah, just a lot of 20. Oh, yeah, 39 points. There's a lot of 27s, 28s, 28, 27. The guy.
I'm not saying he's a bad play. I think he's a perfectly fine play, right? But the way I'm looking at this is we established that we thought there were a couple really good running backs in that 7K tier. We thought there were some really good receivers in that 8K plus tier. And the question is, can you get 4 of them? And if you decide to pay down a quarterback and you deal with the roulette wheel of terrible quarterbacks, that is, Manning, Kaiser, Foles, Mullins, Tannehill, most of them are probably going to dud. But to win the Millie Maker, I just need one of them to work.
Do either of you guys have any idea how good at football Taylor Heineke is, the Carolina?
He was awesome in college.
I mean, Atlanta's defense is really bad. Carolina's at home here. I really like Carolina's weapons, right? They're playing Samuel and more 100% of snaps at this point. I don't know. He's 4K.
He's
it is
4K.
kind of a rough week.
Oh, you can just delete everything I just said. I'll just lock in Heineke at 4K. Done.
I mean,
were you anticipating him being more expensive than 4K?
I honestly just hadn't really registered that he was going to start this week quite completely in my head yet.
Can he run?
I mean, I thought he would be in the Josh Rosen territory, the Josh Dobbs region at 4,500. I didn't think 4K. I think you have to be playing him at 4K.
Does he have any upside rushing ability?
Yeah, in college he had 3 seasons of 350 yards rushing and 4+ rushing touchdowns on like less than 100 attempts.
I think I like that more than the like regular starters that we have at 46 and $4,700.
I totally agree. I think that was a great call by DC. I hadn't really put that thought yet, so that's a great call. I totally think that's the best of the options.
All right. Besides Tyler, the creator of fantasy points at 4K DC, where else we going at quarterback?
I mean, I'm sticking on the Josh Allen train with you, Pat. I don't see any reason to get off this train. He just does it every single week. Crazy athlete. And I mean, what does New England do, right? They make teams drive the entire length of the field, giving up kind of shorter passes. You know, they'll let Josh Allen run for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 yards a carry like he does every week, and he'll take it, right? Like, you watch Buffalo play. I mean, they just roll Josh Allen out every time. He looks deep. If it's not there, you know, he takes his 8 yards on the ground. And I think the Patriots will give that to him. You got to think Tom Brady and the Patriots will probably put up points on Buffalo, although at this point, obviously, New England's offense is worth questioning. But yeah, Josh Allen, I think my favorite play. And then if you want to go off the board, a quarterback that I don't think people will pay up for. A lot of people are going to pay up for Ben, but I don't think people are going to pay up for Deshaun Watson, sandwiched right between Roethlisberger and Drew Brees. You know, against Philadelphia, that banged up secondary. I don't think Houston's going to get much going on the ground against Philadelphia with, you know, Lamar Miller and Alfred Blue. It should be the Deshaun Watson show. And he's another one of those quarterbacks where you can pay up for him because the upside is there, right? He can score with his legs. He can have big games at times. I mean, we've seen him over the last couple of years have so many games with 30-plus fantasy points. So if you're paying up a quarterback, I think Watson is the way to go, especially in tournaments.
Can I put some cold water on the Josh Allen thing real quick?
No.
No.
Okay, that's fine by me.
I don't even understand how you could do that. Josh Allen's so good.
The Patriots take away your best option, and the best option for the Bills is Josh Allen running.
Yeah, are we sure the
I'm
Patriots
just
can?
serious.
Are we sure the Patriots can do that anymore?
Are we? I mean, it's not exactly like Antonio Brown went off.
Dude, you can't say the quarterback is the best option. They're going to take away the quarterback. Like, that's the whole offense.
Rushing. I'm saying they're not going to let him rush. They're going to make him throw.
Then they'll drop some 80-yard bombs on him. It's all good.
Okay, then I mean he hasn't done that yet, right? So, but like if you're playing the quarterback for the rushing upside, I don't think I don't think Bill Belichick's going to let Josh Allen just run all over the field.
I don't think that you need to necessarily. I don't think that you necessarily even need to get the rushing yards from Josh Allen. We even saw it last week that he barely rushed at all, but he's always a threat to score with his legs whenever they get around the goal line, and that's a hard thing to really defend. So because they're broken plays that he's going to take off on, and the potential with these speed guys and his arm against this New England defense, there's plenty of upside for deep passing here. Yeah,
if Josh Allen, scores points via deep passing, then great. But it's more if you're going to play him for those 9 to 10 rushing attempts, I think that's a tough ask.
Aren't these the type of?
I'm playing him for his 25 fantasy points is what I'm playing him for.
Aren't these the type of quarterbacks that just usually burn New England anyway? The mobile quarterbacks.
But most of them have at least what I would call average passing catch options around him. And I mean, Deshaun Watson hasn't put up a good game against New England. I mean, I don't know if it's quite as true as you might think.
Potentially.
I mean, I would have to go look. I can't say I have that in front of me. But what did Josh Allen miss the first game, right?
Yeah. So the last two guys, though, I know Dak Prescott is unplayable because he's playing his zone defense. But what about the other side of the ball? Jameis Winston.
I prefer Dak Prescott there. I'll roll him out there despite Tampa Bay playing 3% more zone defense than the NFL average. I'm not overly concerned about that. And Dak Prescott, he's been way, way better at home over the course of the season. 21.8 DraftKings points at home compared to 14.3 on the road. I think Dallas's offense at home against Tampa Bay in a big game for them, like they're going to go up and down the field. So yeah, give me some Dak, give me some Zeke, some Amari. I think Dallas Cowboys are going to have a big game on offense.
So let me get this straight. Dak beats a completely Josh Johnson-led or Mark Sanchez-led Washington team, and he beats a depleted Philadelphia secondary, and now we're calling him the second coming, and he's actually good at throwing. Like, what am I missing here? Like, this is a guy that barely has had one 300-yard passing game all season, and it was against the aforementioned terrible Eagles secondary. Like, what's the ceiling here? Like,
I mean,
he's not running.
But before that, though, I mean, before the 3 touchdown game, he had scored a rushing touchdown in 5 of 7 games.
That's not exactly like you can't count on that. Like there's a lot of ways
you can't count on it, but
run.
if we're gonna talk about quarterbacks and their potential upside, and you're playing for ceiling, that's a part of their game plan.
I mean, when you're looking at Dak, like 3 rushing attempts for 6 yards, I don't know if you could be called the rushing aspect like a part of the game.
I think the rushing. I am arguing that a rushing touchdown from Dak shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone. It's not like, oh, Tom Brady's on the inch-yard line. That's what we're banking on, and he's going to sneak it in for a rushing touchdown. This is a part of their goal line offense that Dak is going to run the ball.
I just think if you're counting on, I think that you guys are just way overselling the rushing upside of Dak here, or his passing ability at that point. Like I just don't think that any of these guys are worth it. I don't comparing, because the difference between it's not just like you playing Dak at 5'7" compared to Taylor Hinkie at 4,000. It's DeAndre Hopkins and Hinkie versus a 6,500 receiver and one of these quarterbacks. I think that decision is pretty clear.
Well, maybe we can find the money at tight end in order to do this, because you got Kittle, Ertz, Ebron, and Gronk all above 5K, but it seems like that's not going to be your build here, Siege. What's it going to be at the bottom then?
Well, the way it's actually shaping up now with Mr. Taylor at 4K, it's become a little easier to pay up if you wanted to, but honestly, tight end is such a disaster. I think it's kind of just play Ian Thomas and with a guy that can actually throw the ball and go from there. He's been a big part of this offense. Atlanta's given up some points to the tight end this year. I think that's kind of the best of the bad options, but I don't see a tight end that I'm super in love with here.
Yeah, I have none either, Siege. I generally roll out Chris Herndon for cash purposes because I think he has a decent floor. And hey, if Siege is right and Darnold lights them up, Herndon can get on the action here in the red zone. But I might just go to Njoku and roll the dice at 3,800.
Yeah, I could see that for sure. If you could make a case for 15 of these guys, but I just don't know how you could roster any of these guys with much confidence here. But maybe DC's got the answer, so we'll see. Maybe DC, you got the answer here?
I don't think so. Not at tight end. Just a brutal position all year long. I've been pretty much playing Travis Kelce every week if he's on the main slate, which is half the time because the Chiefs are always in prime time. But yeah, it's tough. I think Ebron, if you think the game's going to stay close against the Giants, Ebron is obviously a really good way to go. Can never really go wrong with Ertz. Not the best matchup, but just obviously a stud player, although I do worry a little bit that Foles doesn't throw quite as much to the tight ends as Carson Wentz does. Evan Engram, I think, is interesting if Odell Beckham misses out. 12 targets last week. He's obviously got a lot of talent, and tight ends have done pretty well against the Colts over the course of the year. But, yeah, other than that, Njoku, I think, is fine. Ian Thomas, I think, is a good option. Herndon, it's pretty ugly at tight end.
I guess the only other one I can really think of, Austin Hooper's in a good spot. Carolina really struggles against tight ends, but Tampa really struggles against tight ends too. And I know it's hard to put a lot of faith into Blake Jarwin, but he is running more and more and more routes every single week. And maybe he can beat the zone. I don't know. But he's super cheap, and he does come in against a weaker defense against that position. Pete, would you have any interest there, or is the upside just not high enough?
Yeah, I don't think I would go there, but tight ends, it's ugly enough where you can make a case for a lot of these cheap guys.
All right, well, Siege, Pittsburgh sucks against tight ends. I know they shut down Gronk, but if would you play Saints roulette at tight end?
I don't want to. Will I? If one of them's inactive, I think it becomes a much easier sell. But I want to ask about Taylor Conklin. He looked like he was becoming more involved in that Vikings offense under the new offensive coordinator at DC. Do you have a take on that?
Yeah, it's hard to know. That was kind of one of the surprising changes that the new offensive coordinator made. Do you know the snap share between Conklin and Kyle Rudolph off the top of your head? I'm not sure, but I did certainly notice that was a thing that they were doing. So I think you could do that. Obviously, I have a lot of faith in the Vikings offense, and if he's going to be on the field more, if there's news that comes out of of Minnesota that's going to continue to be the case, then I think that could be a sneaky way to go.
So last week, Kyle Rudolph played 74% of the snaps. Conklin played 33%. And that was
That's not enough for me to use him then. No.
Yeah, that's a tough sell. But maybe he sees that role expand. And it's really hard to get a judge on that game because they were up by so much they were up 21-0. Then Miami fought back. Then they got up big again. Were they running the offense that we're going to expect to see from them in potentially a closer game?
I mean, there's no real reason.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, DC.
Well, it's not like Kyle Rudolph. I know he hasn't had a great year, but he hasn't played especially poorly or anything like that. So I think, maybe a 75-25 snap share again. I'm not playing a tight end playing 25% of the snaps. No thanks.
Yeah, no.
Let's close this with defenses. Pete, we'll start with you. Is there anyone that just pops right off?
I think the Colts are interesting against the Giants. I'm always looking to roster defenses against Eli Manning, just obviously kind of a statue back there. The Browns at home, motivated to win clearly against, a really, really bad Bengals offense, a really bad Bengals team that should probably be forced to throw a bunch. And then I'll take the Vikings, a motivated Vikings team. I know they're going on the road to Detroit, but Detroit's offense has looked bad. And Minnesota, I think they have the highest adjusted sack rate of any team in the league. So those are three that do stick out to me at the top.
Siege for me, I'm actually looking at Jacksonville on the road, only $2,700. Tannehill was dropped 9 times last week. I know this is more of a run fest, but are they really just going to turn over the keys to Ballage and say, you know what, here's 25 carries? I don't think that's going to be the case. And Jacksonville is still getting to the quarterback. So it's a one part of their team that I don't think that they're packing in yet.
Yeah, I think it's a viable option. I think if DeShone Kizer starts, and I know I made fun of him, and I definitely will have some if he starts.
You mean DeShone Kizer from Notre Dame?
Kizer. Yeah, got to get that St. Brown stack, man. Got to get that Notre Dame game stack in there, all right? But I do think the Jets defense at 2,200 would be a phenomenal play at that point. This is a defense that has played much better at home than on the road this season. Putting up some quality performances. So I would give me some Jets if Kizer was to start.
One of the highest blitz percentages in all of football as well. So when they cash in big if they get to the quarterback. Pete, what do you make of Philly's D against Houston, knowing that Deshaun Watson takes so many sacks that it might be true that Deshaun Watson can score a lot of fantasy points, but the Eagles D could score a lot of fantasy points too if you put him into bad situations?
Yep, always willing to roster defenses, especially when Deshaun Watson and the Texans go on the road. That offensive line is just terrible. Watson, he's trying to make a big play every drop back, it seems like, and he's willing to try to evade rushers, throw into coverage, all that type of thing. So, yeah, I think the Eagles defense certainly in play. I know we like Josh Allen, but, if you think that the Patriots are going to be able to take away what he does well, Allen certainly has accuracy issues, so you could look at the Patriots too.
Yeah,
Cleveland versus Driscoll as well.
Cleveland versus Driscoll isn't bad. I guess the only other one, I know it's a bit more expensive, but the Rams at 3,200 against Josh Rosen. Just playing against Josh Rosen seems to be good enough for 10 points every week.
Yep.
All right. That'll do it on the Pat Mayo Experience. Week 16, as Siege pointed out. DraftKings picks and preview. Do we come up with a finalized line here that we're going to have for the fight or what? So it's minus 500? Is that what you said, Siege?
I think DC opens like minus 500. Yeah, I think that's about right.
Give yourself some credit, man.
You're really
Look, the lines aren't based off of what it actually is going to happen. It's based off of public perception, and the public perception is that you're the big favorite. I'm not going to come sit here and say you're not.
I'm seeing a lot of people on Twitter talking about, you got the size advantage over me. They're a lot of the fish, I think, are going to be betting on the Siege, hopefully.
Oh, I think it's going to all the public money is going to flow in on DC. I don't think there's much concern about that.
If you weren't looking on similar action on each side of the Lion Siege, and you wanted to set a true line for this fight, what would it be?
I think I should be the favorite. I think I'm really confident that I'm going to win this fight. So,
how long are the rounds?
If you think this is getting out of the first round, Pat, you're capping it wrong.
Like either you knock out DC or you just pass out due to exhaustion.
I mean, look, I think DC's not gonna take this lightly. He's gonna show up to the gym. We've seen it before. You get landed with one and that's that. So you gotta be ready. But I think that push come to shove, I do think.
Siege, if you're planning to knock me out in the first round, we better take the headgear off, I think.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if you guys are wearing the padded boxing helmets, then your knockout percentage goes way down. I would have to think.
It does. I mean, I'm playing into DC's. I'm making the rules as much in DC's favor as possible. I don't need any excuses when this ends poorly for him.
What about the excuse when the fight doesn't happen?
I mean, then that's going to be a DC injury probably.
DC shoulder injury. He's going to be like Cam Newton out there. All right, Siege, Pimp, Arbor Prone, what's going on over there?
Yeah, NBA content in full swing and preseason baseball not too far away for the season long. Hey, DC, by the way, have you regged that draft yet or no? We still got to do that.
Oh, I'll be there.
All right, excellent. Yeah, no. So preseason, season long, our first set of content should be up right around the new year. So definitely check that out as well, along with NBA every single day.
So at the Siege DFS on Twitter, you can follow Pete at DraftCheat. What do you guys got going on live stream wise on Guru Elite?
Yeah, Fantasy Guru Elite. Check it out. We got a recent $1 million winner, Jeff El Jefe, Jeff Collins. We've got an NFL show every Sunday morning, breaking down all the games in a similar manner like we did today. NBA content with me and Collins, obviously. And actually, we have a deal right now. If you sign up for NBA for the rest of the year, you will get the rest of our NFL content, I believe, through the playoffs totally free. So check it out, fantasyguruelite.com.
Is there anything more toxic on the internet than the Guru Elite live chat during football?
It's not just during football. That's like 24/7, man.
All right, GuruElite.com. You can follow Pete on Twitter, like I mentioned, at DraftCheat. You can follow me on Insta, Facebook, and the Twitters at the PME. And remember to subscribe to the audio podcast wherever you can download podcasts. You can find the cheat sheet for this show up on Friday on DKPlaybook.com. Stick around, smash the like button for the show on your way out. I'm Pat Mayo. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you next time.
Mayo experience! Experience!